how did you get your name?
How did I get my name? That I know of. I wasn't coherent at the time, but I don't think I was here at the time. I don't know which one actually came up with the name Charles, but they wanted me to have a good American name because my dad's name was August Huntz, or was it Hunt? He would switch it around. You never knew. So anyway, so Huntz is John. So they never correlated that, but they wanted me to have, from what I understand. So Charles sounded right. So they used John as my middle name after Dad. And finally, some friends of them said, "Why did you?" This is from what I understand. They suggested, they said, "Why did you name him Charles when his father's name is John? Now you named your firstborn son, who's 8.5 years older, Elwood. You should have at least one to carry on the father's name, because my dad's name, if I'm not mistaken, was Huntz. Oh, that's a good idea. So we'll just call him John." So that's how I grew up with the name of John. When I'm going through elementary school, high school, and the Vietnam thing's going on, and everybody's getting drafted, and I go, I don't want to be drafted, so I'm going to join the branch of service. So I go down to the recruiting office and sign up. So they said, okay, we need your birth certificate and all that stuff. So I go down and take my birth certificate. Well, in the middle of the city of Chicago, you take the transit, the bus, streetcar bus, whatever. I go down there and I said, let me take a look at my birth certificate. My mom hands me my birth certificate to take down to the recruiting office. So I pull it out and I'm going, what? Charles? My first name is Charles. So I was 18 years old before I found out my name was Charles.
Oh my God. 18.
I was 18 before I knew my real name. So I'm going, what happened? Well, we decided to call you Johnny because your dad's name is John. But we never had it changed.
So this next question, I know this is highly disputed because no one knows the truth.
Okay.
But how did your parents meet?
My mom was, at the time when she was in Germany, it was a very, there's a lot of turmoil going on with politics. And soldiers were around and everything, and this is the late 20s. And so I think my mom, she was a teenager at the time, maybe 16 or so. So anyway, so she was at the train station. Well, my brother says, no, it was the bus station. It was both. It was a train station and a bus station. The bus would come, you could take a train from one town to another town, and if you're going to go somewhere else and the train didn't go, there was also a bus station. The bus would take you. So it was both a train station and a bus station. And so there was a guy following my mom, and she was afraid what his intentions were. And so she came up to my dad. I don't know if she knew him. She may have known who he was or had seen him before, but he didn't live in town. This is in Dresden. He lived out of town in the country. So he was there, and she walked up to him and said, can you help me? I have a man following me. Can you pretend that you were supposed to meet me? And he was there to meet somebody on the train, coming in on the train. So he says, oh yeah, well, he said, my name is Ellen. Anyway, so he's, oh, hi Ellen, come in, I'm so good. So then he played the part. And made like they were boyfriend, girlfriend. I think they were 9 years or 11 years apart, something like that. And so anyway, so he played the part, and the guy left. And so they became acquaintances after that. She said that's how they met, on the platform at the train station / bus station, and they got to be pen pals, friends. So then when my dad came over here, they wrote back and forth, and the rest is history.
In your early life, what were your parents like?
They worked all the time. Mm-hmm. My dad was real stern. He didn't show any affection, none. And it was all business. And my mom, she would counteract that we all had to participate in our chores and help with the house, whatever needed to be done. Something had to be done in springtime or the fall time, get the house ready for the winter, put up storm windows, take down the storm windows, put up screens, whatever, and that was an ordeal. But not all the time, but just when we were asked to do things. And then when he wasn't working at work, he was home like 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then he had the bakery in the basement, and so the bakery was, he worked down there 3-4 days a week at least, so he was always down there. But he liked to take vacations. He was very conservative, watched her pennies really close, but when it came to vacation time, he had a good time.
What kind of places did y'all vacation at?
Well, he liked to go fishing a lot. He liked to go fishing, but he would try to get a fishing guide so he could get the good stuff. And then, of course, around there, Michigan, Wisconsin, there's all kinds of places to go. But one time, we actually went to Philadelphia. I mean, we went on a big excursion. I didn't know why, but it was because there was an alternative reason. At one time, we had a big vacation where we went all the way into New York City, saw the Statue of Liberty and everything. We went into Philadelphia and we saw, I guess, Lincoln's home and all that stuff. Toured all of the different sites in Washington, D.C. and everything. We went through D.C. and everything, and we went through Smithsonian. Yes, I believe we even took us through the Smithsonian and everything. But my dad was offered a position with a company in the city of New York, and we didn't like it, so he turned it down. But he liked to go fishing and go up to, they took us up a couple times to the dunes. Again, there's a real famous place, I think it's called Crystal Lake. And believe it or not, your grandma had been to Crystal Lake when she was a kid. The same place we vacationed one time up at Crystal Lake. Wow. They had these big slides in the water. You'd be, I don't know, it's been so many years ago from what I recall, you'd be in the water, you'd be like knee deep in the water, and you go up this great big ladder, and you go down this huge slide. Then I don't know, the water was like, 3-4 feet deep when you hit the water, and so they had slides in the water and everything. And then one winter, we went up there one time, and the lake was froze over, and it was really, really neat. The ice was crystal clear, and you could walk on the ice, and the fish would be following you under the ice. Under the ice.
What are some of your earliest memories?
Walking to school every day.
In the snow, uphill both ways.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't uphill, but at any rate, it was under the viaduct. When I remember, for some reason, I don't know why, but at first, my mom, when I first started going to school, we only had one car. So Dad easily leaves for work at 4 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock, whatever. So we only had one car. So Mom would have to walk me to school. And I'd have to check. I never checked, but I think it's a mile. No. It could have been up to 2 to 3 miles. I'm not sure. And I really need to verify that, how far it really was. It's several miles. She would walk me to school when I was little. And then I remember once or twice she made Woody walk me to school. So that means he had to walk back. We didn't have the money for the bus. And then, like I say, every Christmas, we always had the big, a Christmas program, the Lutheran Church, how they always put on a big Christmas program every Christmas, and you're in the choir, and they had the organist, and they had 2 different, in the church we were in, wasn't that big a church, maybe it held 150 people or 75. Anyway, 175 maybe. So anyway, they had choir lofts on both sides, on the sides, near up front. The organ was facing the front of the church, and then the choir loft, not a loft, but the choir faced the congregation. So you had one on either side. So anyway, so we'd have both sides filled up, and then the choir director would direct us and all that. I remember we used to have a senior choir. The regular choir would sit by the organist, in front of the organist. But then the senior choir think you had to be over 60 to be in that senior choir. And boy, they might have been good at one time, but not at their age. So, at any rate, it was always a challenge to listen through it. Okay, sit there, So, no comment. They did their best.
What were your siblings like when you were young?
We had our disagreements, and we wanted our space like anybody, And
what's the order of the siblings? You and your siblings?
Yeah, my Uncle Phil, he's the youngest, and then my sister Arlene, she's 2 years younger than me, almost 2 years younger. And then I'm number two at 4, 3, and I'm number two. And then Woody, he is the firstborn, and he was born in 1935, and I'm 1944, and then Arlene is 1946, and I don't know, Philip is 49, I think.
What's a memorable story of your brothers and sisters from your childhood?
I don't know. There was always a little bit of jealousy there, between your Uncle Phil and Phil, I think in all of us, because he was the favorite. Because he was really witty, he was really quick, he was cute as a button, and when he was real little, he had this curly hair, curly hair. It was all curls. And I think they were like blonde. He had blonde curly hair. And but he used to do the cutest things, and he'd always get everybody's attention. He'd always do everything for attention, So we used to get a kick out of his antics, getting kicks. And so I got a kick out of it, though, is when Dad took him to the barber shop one day, and Mom had no idea. And he cut off all his curls. Mom was so upset. She was so upset, So, at any rate, that's the way it is. He needed a haircut. He got a haircut. That's it. And I had to chuckle. Phil got all his curls cut off. He's not so cute anymore.
Did your family have any holiday traditions?
Well, I don't know traditions. Well, on Thanksgiving, my dad had duck. We had turkey. He had duck.
Did he not like turkey?
No, he loved duck. And so like I say, it was always a big deal, Thanksgiving turkey and all the meal, all the trimmings. We all had to help a little bit here and there, and put everything together. But the duck was Dad's, and at the end of the meal, if there's any duck left over, then we get some of the duck, And then of course, we had to. I forget what the tradition was with the wishbone. We had the wishbone deal. We had to, break the wishbone. I forget what the ritual was because there was 3 of us, and we'd have to fight for there's only 2.
We did it last year.
Yeah. So I don't remember what the rule was on that. So.
When did the Christmas stolen recipe tradition start?
Oh, they've always made. My mom always had, as far as back as I can remember, she always made Stollen because that's a German tradition. That's something they do. And then, of course, the fruitcake thing also. And from what I recall, my mom and dad, my dad was looking for, I guess he must have had an opportunity because there were specialty shops that when it came to the holiday times, that he would sell to the fruitcakes and the Stollen, mostly the fruitcakes. And then he had some sort of egg. It was the same, I think it was the same recipe as the lamb was at Easter time. Oh, that's what it was. Easter time, he had lambs and he had eggs. And I mean the eggs were this big. It was a half.
Yeah.
and then he would decorate it all up as really pretty, and he would sell those to specialty shops. So I think he was looking for a fruitcake recipe, and they tried. This is before, maybe before I was even born. From what my mom, I remember calling my mom telling me that they tried different types of fruitcakes, and the fruitcake that they really liked the best was called a Paradise fruitcake, which is well known in the Chicagoland area. So they tried to duplicate. Bakers do that. They try to, cooks do the same thing. Try to come up with the same recipe without having a recipe. Trying to develop that same product, and they came up with their recipe, and they thought it was even better, and a lot of people did too. So it ended up to be quite a tradition. We would get involved with the fruitcakes, because my mom and dad, my mom told me that when my dad died, they'd had that bakery for 14 years. Well, I was 14 years old, so they started it right after I was born. But they developed that fruitcake, and then it became a tradition. And then we all helped work out at Christmas time, Thanksgiving and all that, doing the fruitcakes and the lambs and all that. Of course, my mom and dad did a lot of that, but they had all kinds of lamb molds. I mean, there was cast iron lamb molds that it cost like $100 a piece today. They had tons of them. They were everywhere. We had cabinets full of them. But it was a shame what happened to him, because after he passed, all of that stuff just sat in there. They got rusty, and some of them got to be so bad, and I don't know what happened to all of them. But we salvaged some of them, and then some of them went out to the family. But I think some of them got trashed. A lot of them got trashed. We had a lot of them.
What's the happiest memory from your childhood?
I do not know. Let me see. Well, I had some real good experiences. I used to love, when I got older and started riding a bicycle, I rode a bicycle later in life. I was too chicken. But anyway, when I got my independence riding a bicycle, I guess I was 13 or 14 maybe, I guess. So then I would go to the park. I'd love to go to the park, Marquette Park. And in the springtime especially, take a kite. And there was a lot of open space where you could fly a kite. And so I would spend the whole day at the park, just by myself. And lay back and watch the clouds and the whole bit, fly my kite, whatever. And there, once in a while, there would be other people there, and they'd have, back then, it was popular to have these little U-line airplanes, the U-line control. You just go in a circle, and it goes up and down, you go back and forth. And once in a while, there'd be somebody out there, a couple guys out flying their little airplanes, their gas model airplanes, and then sometimes they'd have little clubs that would come out to the park, and they had a pond. It was more like through the whole park, it was like a big pond. It looked more like a creek that didn't flow. Yeah. It was only about 3 or 4 feet deep as far as, it wasn't very deep. But there was little fish in there and crawdads and stuff like that, and people would sometimes come out with their little boats, and they would have radio control boats. And back then it was really expensive to have radio control, and they'd have their little speed boats or little boats on the water, or sailboats. In fact, I had, I guess at Christmas time, it must have been a Christmas present, I got a kit to put a sailboat together, similar to the one I built. Yeah. And I had the best time. Went out with a movie camera, 16 millimeter deal, my dad had, and had my sailboat, and let the wind take it wherever it wanted to go. So used to really enjoy going out to the park by myself. I'd spend the whole day out in the park by myself with my sailboat or with a kite or something.
What kind of movies, music, and books did you enjoy as a kid?
Yeah, I had one friend who would play records. I couldn't afford the records, but he could. He would get the 45 RPM, and we'd, you know, play all the, the latest hits, that were on the radio. And we used to really get a kick out of, that's when they had the song about the one-eyed purple.
The Purple People Eater?
Yeah, the purple people eater, and had all these crazy songs,
Okay.
One-eyed, one-horned, flying purple people eater. That's who he was.
But tell me about your military experience.
Well, like I said, the Vietnam thing was going on really bad, and everybody's being drafted. And my neighbor a few years before was in, I guess he was in the Army, but he was in Saigon, and he was in downtown Saigon, he said, and they were in a little pub, and he said you couldn't tell the Viet Cong from the Vietnamese. They were really the same. And they would be friendly at night, and then during the day they'd try to kill you. Mm-hmm. So he was in the pub, and a grenade went off, and he got some shrapnel, and he was eventually discharged from the service because there was shrapnel in his body. They never were able to get out of him. And so he just briefly mentioned how bad it was over there before. This was before it ever escalated. And so it was really serious. So I knew I had to sign up for the service. So when I signed up to go in on the 3rd of January because I wanted to go in after the holidays. So I went in 3rd of January and ended up in San Antonio, Texas, with all Air Force basic training is in San Antonio, Texas. And so the cold was not a big deal for us. We were all Chicagoans. We had a whole passel of us. There must have been 200 of us in the, when we went in for our physical and all that stuff, and processed us all and everything, and then flew us down to San Antonio. So at any rate, so we ended up in basic training in San Antonio. So after 6 weeks or so of that, being intimidated, learning how to march, you by your test grades, they call you in and they tell you what your job function was going to be according to your test grades. I don't remember at what time when they did that, either before or after. Oh, I think it was before I actually went in. They told me I did pretty bad on my test score because when I take a test, I freeze, and there's no second chance. That's it. And then they make that plain and clear, and then that puts more pressure, So you freeze up. So they said you qualify for 2 career fields, 1 the motor pool, 2 the fire department. So that's on the bottom. So and I said, okay, I'll take the fire department. Forget the motor pool. I've done mechanic work. I've done body work. I know I don't want to do, that's kind of a dirty business. And so I said, give me the fire department. So then we were assigned our tech school after basic. So I ended up in Greenville, Mississippi. So when I got to Greenville, Mississippi, we went through fire training school. All the guys in the group were all from somewhere else, from all over the United States. And we were together so long with each other, we picked up each other's lingo. We all had the same lingo. We all picked up each other's slangs and stuff like that. One guy was from Maine, and he would call a light bulb a light bub. A light bub. That was a light bulb. So we all had these different funny names and slangs. We had, I guess, to digress back to boot camp. Since we were from Chicago, and it was January, San Antonio gets a lot of freezing rain in January. So one day, we were aroused and woken at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I forget what it was. Lights are on, everybody out. Ding, 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 ding. What? It's not even time to be up yet. So you guys are on KP. Well, we didn't know about that. He said, yeah, we have an emergency. The whole barracks is on KP. They would take the whole barracks. When it was time for you to kitchen duty, you're on KP. So then we found out, they said, this is an abnormal situation. Normally you're notified ahead of time, but we need somebody on KP. We need all of you on KP today, now. Get dressed, get ready to go. You're marching to KP. It was 20-something degrees outside, freezing rain. Come to find out, the barracks next to us, they were on KP duty. And they got out there for KP duty, and they could not march on the ice. They all fell and hurt themselves, and they were all messed up.
So they had to get the Chicago boys.
So they got us, they said, these guys are from Chicago. They must know how to do it. So needless to say, we all lined up and got in formation, and we knew we couldn't march on ice. So we shuffled our way the best we could in cadence. And we shuffled our way, and no one fell. And it was quite a distance. And we made it, 100% of us. And I don't know if that bought us any kudos or not, I don't know. But anyway, so we ended up on KP duty that day because nobody could make it in the ice. And the barracks that was supposed to have KP, they couldn't make it. They just were falling all over themselves, and and not one of us fell.
When you met Grandma, and how did you meet?
I was in the service. I was back from Alaska, and so I don't know. Let's see. So I guess it was around 65, something 65. So 21, 20 or 21, and so I was. I had a roommate. He had dates all the time. He was always dating one girl or another girl, whatever. So somehow he met my wife, he met Donna, and unbeknownst to me, she worked in the post exchange right on the base. So anyway, she broke up with him because he was real handsy. He was a touchy-feely guy, and she had enough of him, out of here. So she broke up with him, and he said, you looking for a date? And I said, well, I don't know, I guess so. And he said, well, I'll give you a phone number. He says, let me fix you up with somebody. So anyway, so I called her. I called her shortly after that, and then she said, yeah, let's meet up somewhere. And then so I met her, and she wasn't staying at her mom and dad's house. She had moved out. Her and her stepmother got into it. So we were right about the same age. Well, actually, we're a year difference, a year apart. 11 months difference. So anyway, so she says, we're going to double date. So she was showing me around. So we met, we got to knowing each other a little bit, and we were in the car, and we picked up this friend of hers, and so whoever this guy was, I don't know. Anyway, him and Donna's friend was in the back seat. We were in the front seat. And she showed me around town, and she takes me over to the big Catholic shrine. They had a big Catholic shrine. It was just absolutely beautiful. And these were grounds, acres and acres of grounds. It was just gorgeous. And people would just come by there, and it was lit up real pretty, and especially at Christmas time. So lo and behold, we were just walking around, and they had like bells that would go off, ding, 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 and all that stuff at the hour, like a clock would, at the hour, and then the half hour, whatever, they'd be gonging and stuff, as I recall. So all of a sudden, her girlfriend saw one of her ex-boyfriends and freaked out, and so she freaked out, and she ran back to the car, and so it was all over. So we had to take her home. So then she got to know me on a double date. So then we started dating after that, So whenever I got a chance to get in town, got a chance, which was every other day. I worked one day on, one day off, being in the fire department. So we finally got married, hitched up at 9 months, and I think at that time, oh, that's right, it was we got married in April, so
Slow down.
no, we got, so it was, I think we just dated 9 months. But she was my actually first real, but we fell in love.
So what attracted you to Grandma when you first met and when you started dating?
I thought she was attractive right off the bat. She was attractive, and she was very skinny, very thin, and I was always attracted to shorter women, you know. And so after we got to know each other and we could share with each other, we both had our little things that we were working through. You know, we all have our little problems, and we were able to share with each other our feelings and our thoughts, and we just helped each other talk these problems out. We were like each other's psychiatrists, I guess. We were just just talk it out, and when it helps to let it out. And so we just bonded. That's all.
What was your marriage proposal like? How did you propose?
Well, we were in the car and I proposed. But anyway, it took me a long time. I tried to break up. I tried to break up. I said, we're getting too serious. So I said, maybe we ought to just cool it a little bit, because I wanted to see if I really was in love. So she said, well, okay, so she abided by that. And after about 2 weeks, I realized that, I couldn't live without her. And then finally I go, I'm sorry, but this is, I got to see you again. I just missed her so much. So once we started seeing each other again, I tried to propose many times, but I had always heard and seen it happen where once someone had proposed, the relationship changed. One or the other their true colors came out, and I was afraid of that happening, and so finally I just pulled the trigger. But
tell me about your wedding and what it was like.
Oh my, real simple. I notified my mom and my brothers, up north that we're getting married in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I don't know if I even gave them more than that, 3 or 4 weeks.
How did they react to the news?
Oh my gosh. And my mom, she wanted to know if I was serious about this girl. And so one time before I engaged, she got me into church over the weekend. And so while we're sitting in church, she pops the question, well, how serious is it between you two? Are you going to get married? Or, oh, no. Are you serious? No. She just knew I wouldn't lie in church, So finally, my mom and my brother drove down in my mom's car. And so I had it all set up. There was accommodations on the base where they could stay, and it was just a couple bucks a night. It was real cheap. It was like $10, $12 a night. That was it. So anyway, so we had a small wedding, and the wedding was at the chapel. I was in uniform, so I was at the chapel. And the reception was at my in-law's house, my father-in-law and stepmother-in-law's house. And I don't know, there might have been 12 of us there. That's about it. That's it, just family. My mom and my brother, and then, her three brothers, and I think her sister was in Virginia at the time. So, but at any rate, just a handful of us there, and that was it,
Where did you go on your honeymoon?
We didn't.
You never had a honeymoon?
Well, we had one 2 years later.
Okay, it still counts.
Yeah. So we had a small upstairs apartment and on North Main. And so we honeymooned I got off work for 3 days or 5 days, whatever it was. So I got a few days off of work for that. So, so we just honeymooned in place. And then 2 years later, I told her, I said, I'm going to take you someplace that I have been at least 3 or 4 times, and I just loved it. So we're going to take a honeymoon and go up there. And so we went up to Smoky Mountains. So we went up in the Smoky Mountains, and we stumbled across a chateau. They called it a chateau. And they had these cute little cabins, but I recall they were like brick cabins, you know. They all had a telephone in them. You know, for each one to have a telephone was, at that time, was odd. And it was right in the middle of everything, you know, Lookout Mountain and Ruby Falls and just different places. So I took her through all of that, and we went through the Rocky Mountains and toured everywhere we could tour, you know. So, but it was really, really fascinating. And then she really got a big kick out of, we were driving on the highway, and up there in the Smoky Mountains, you're pretty high up there, and sometimes, and Smoky Mountains aren't like the mountains out west. You know, they're full of trees and as well as rock, but they're not giant. They're just good size. But we were up there so high that one time we drove through a cloud. So I slowed down on the freeway. There wasn't any traffic. Slowed down, had the windows all rolled down, and she experienced being in a cloud, which was she thought was really cool, because the air was so wet. It was literally unbelievably wet, you know, and you think you saw humidity. You've never seen anything so wet until you drive through a cloud, you know. We had a real good time at the Smoky Mountains. That was great. Yeah, she enjoyed it.
What were your first years of marriage like?
We only had one incident. We never fought. We never argued. Donna wanted. She always had to take care of everybody else. And when she was bored, she'd clean the house, and then she'd clean it again. And so we had a small little kitchen. You know, I think the stove had 3 burners on it. You know, our first dinner meal. Maybe it's the second day. Yeah, it was the second day. We got married, and she had some food in the house. So she went out and got some groceries, and so I came home, and so she had baked a cake. She was trying to make a cake, and she didn't realize how unlevel the stove was. When it came out, it was so lopsided, you know. I said, well, you know, you can cut it off. And she was having a time with it. She had a time with it. And we lived we were on the second floor, small efficiency apartment. It was actually a furnished apartment, so we didn't even have our own furniture. And so the window was open, and she got so mad that cake didn't come out, and she was trying to get it, and she was so frustrated, she put her fist through the cake and threw it out the window. Bam! Yeah, she threw it out the window.
She literally threw it out the window?
Yeah.
With the pan and all?
Well, no, it didn't have the pan on.
She just picked up the cake.
The plate, well, the plate and all, whatever. Threw it out the window. Yeah. It was so lopsided and everything. I said, it's okay, it still eats. You know, it's not a big deal. And she wanted it so much to be perfect, you know.
Yeah.
That she was so frustrated. Oh, and then our first dinner meal together, she went out, and there's a great big platter of pork steaks, not pork chops, pork steaks. 7 pork steaks, mashed potatoes, all this food. 2 of us. I'm going, my gosh, I didn't know she was such a big eater. And so I said, well, I know. Boy, this is wonderful. I said, so I went and took a pork steak, and she took a pork steak, and I said, we're going to have company for dinner? I don't know, just the two of us. I said, who are the rest of the stakeholders? 5 left. They're all for you. I said, they're all for me. Well, yeah, you're a big guy. Figured you eat a lot. I said, no, I can eat one, maybe a little more. Really? I said, how come you cook so much? Well, I'm always cooking for the family of 5, and that's all I know how to do. I cook everything beef, lots of potatoes, lots of vegetables, and lots of meat. So she says, I guess I'm gonna have to learn to not cook so much at one time. So, but anyway, she was so used to just cooking for everybody. I had 7 pork steaks.
What have you learned the most from Grandma? What did you learn the most from her?
I was never able to do what she could do. So she said her dad taught her that no matter how important a person may seem to be, no matter how they carry themselves or how much charisma they have, or they say, oh, that's Mr. So-and-so, or this is the vice president of this and this, or whatever. She says, just remember, they put their pants on one leg at a time. And you need to talk. You need to be able to speak to people at their level, whether it's someone educated really high or somebody that is just no matter where. You have to meet them and be on the same as well as eye level. Stare them, look at them eye to eye, and talk to that person eye to eye, and not be intimidated by them. And she could get results where no one else could get results. Because when you were born, you had to be in the hospital a little bit longer, and your dad's insurance wasn't going to cover that. So at any rate, they weren't going to cover any of the expenses of the other expenses, because we actually came in turn, and you were there like 3-4 weeks, something like that. So lo and behold, she was having problem with the hospital administrator. Angie was, and they were insisting on certain payments, setting up a payment program. It was going to cost so many thousands of dollars extra and all that stuff. And I mean, that was out of the question. There was no way. And that could happen. So she got on the phone and she just said, this is Angela Barbish. Your grandma. She goes, this is Angela Barbish. May I come in and speak with you? Can we talk about this? This is the president of the bank. Oh, not bank, a hospital. The guy in charge, who's ever in charge of the hospital, he was. So she set up an appointment. So here I was, I wait. She said, now you wait outside. I'm gonna go in and talk to him. And it didn't take long at all, 15, 20 minutes. Here she comes. It's all taken care of. Not a problem, let's go. And we get back in the car and go, what happened? Well, we sat down and we had a good long talk. Told him the way it was, and that there was no reason to try to get blood out of a turnip or whatever. I'm putting those words into her mouth. But she said, these kids don't have it. We sure don't have it. And, it can also be a write-off for a hospital. Hospitals write these things off all the time as charity cases and all that stuff. And so she talked to him about it being in his favor to use it as a tax write-off. And so he said, very good, we'll do that. So her dad taught her how to communicate. I never did learn that.
I didn't either. How did you spend your free time outside of work?
Well, I always had a little project going somewhere. But no, I always had something going on, and it was kind of therapy, because after a hard week I'd want to get away from it. And so I did body work and mechanic work. I was shade tree mechanic, you name it, I'd try it, no matter what it was. I wasn't afraid to try anything. So if it was from doing plumbing work in the house or working on the house or working on a car or whatever it was. So that's how I spent my leisure time working at something other than what I work. And then later on, when I was working with the POTS, plain old telephone service, I was working in Southwest Houston, and it was I saw a lot of bad stuff, a lot of poverty. It really got to me. So it bothered me. So then we bought some property in the early 80s outside of Huntsville. So I would piddle around on that property, get some garden tractors and ride the garden tractors and cut the grass, and had a little travel trailer there, a little 22-footer or something like that. And had a little barn there where I had some stuff in it. So we spent time out in the country, and try to go up there once or twice a month, especially in the summertime. And it was really pretty up there. You could get away. But sometimes the working conditions got to me, and so that's how I got away from it. I would just work at something else. Oh, once in a while, when I was younger, we'd go fishing or something like that, and but then after a while, I just didn't do that anymore.
Yeah.
But we did go to Galveston when we were younger. We'd go fishing a lot.
We have successfully gone through early life and midlife, and now we are going on to later life and reflection.
Oh.
So these are going to be more relevant to you now, kind of, and just reflections on life and things you've learned.
Hope I've learned.
See if you pass the test.
See if I pass the test.
What was the hardest loss that you had with a friend or family member?
I think my dad. It was fairly sudden because he had elective surgery he had ulcers really bad, and they said they could treat it with medication, and it'd take a while to heal all those ulcers that he had. He had 7 ulcers from what I recall. And he decided to just do the operation, get the stomach out of there, and they cut most of it out. They just left a little bit in. So he did that, and so then I got to know my dad a little bit more because he was, those ulcers were eating him up all the time, and he was really not high strung, but a very intense person. And at any rate, we won't get into all that, but he was a different person. And my mom said that, you're so much like your dad. She told me, she says, you look like your dad, you have the mannerisms of your dad. And she says, now that your dad had that surgery, he's back to what he used to be in his 20s. He was 52 or 53 years old. So he's back to where he was. And things didn't bother him anymore. So his demeanor had completely changed, and he was so different. And so I just started to get know my dad a little bit more. And then when he had he had to have blood transfusions, and he had gotten hepatitis from the blood transfusion, and his kidneys were failing. They didn't have a kidney machine back then. They had 2, from what I recall, there was only 2 in existence, and the closest one was in Philadelphia, and by the time they got it to him, he barely had a chance to survive. I don't remember what the odds were. So, but he didn't make it. So he was gone in no time. And then, my brother he was married, and, he had a family and everything. So I was the oldest, so I was in charge, so I had a hard time getting it over it because that was part of what Donna helped me get over, because I was never, I never grieved my father's death. And so she helped me with that. That was our bonding, I guess. So she realized that, I had that regret, had all these regrets inside. And it was really hard for me to get over that. It took me years. It took me about, well, he died in 1958, and so we got married in 1966. It was 6, 7 years. I was carrying that guilt with me, So at any rate, so that was an inner hurt that she helped get me out. So that's, and like I say, with my mom, when my mom passed, she was almost 92. And she told us for many years, now, Johnny, remember, I'm not going to be here forever. We all have to go sometime. I'm older now. I have these issues. Just remember, I'm not always going to be here, because she was the glue that held the family together, So, she prepared us, that someday she's not going to be here. It was hard and sad losing my mom, my stepdad, but my dad, I never grieved him when I was 14, and I looked like I was 20, I think I don't know if I told you a story or not, but when I met when I got introduced to my wife's dad and his buddy, his best buddy, they used to play pinochle or something. They played cards. They played cards all the time on the weekend, and they drink their beer, smoke cigars, and play cards, just the two of them, and and they had a bet going on how old I was. I was 20 and 21, and they thought I was 32. They thought I was in the 30s. I always looked older than what I was. So everybody expected me to act and look and be older than what I really was. I was only 14, and I wasn't prepared for that. So at any rate, my dad was the hardest. But Donna helped me get over it. She got me through it. So.
As of right now, of today's date, who are your best friends? Do you have any?
Well, my buddy right next door here, Ty. And then I have a buddy up in Cameron, Texas, Owen.
Yeah.
He lost his wife about 3-4 years ago. We've been going to the church up there for many years. We used to go once a month. We used to go up there all the time, and it was the pastor. The pastor was actually more like a brother. We were like brothers to each other, and we met in the 70s. And he passed away. Oh my gosh, 10 years ago now, I think.
Yeah.
But we were like brothers, and he was just a terrific guy and a terrific preacher. And he preached. He was the kind of guy that preached. He lived the life that he preached, And so Owen and his wife, they were just phenomenal people up there. But Owen and Ty really, they're my best buds, I guess. And then I've got a few other good buddies that I worked with, with the O'Reilly store, that I keep in touch with and all that stuff. And they're all good guys. We keep in touch here and there, but like I say, I can tell those two guys anything.
Yeah.
So.
What are some of the most important things that you've learned in your life?
One thing, the first thing that comes to mind is not to be so critical of others and of situations. For instance, when Angie was born, she was a perfect kid. Never had a problem. We were a unit. We were a knit unit. And your grandma and I, we started going to church after a while. We was going to every church. We've been in church sometimes 3 days a week. We were on Wednesday night, Friday night, Sunday. Not every week, but we would a lot of times be 2 days a week. And Angie, just a little thing, toddler, she would sleep under the pew, You wouldn't even know she's there. She would just have a coloring book or whatever it is, and she never created a fuss. I just couldn't understand people that had such unruly kids. They were They're noisy. Can't they control those kids any better than that? I was really critical of other people, other parents. Oh my gosh. Until I got Chrissy. When we got Chrissy, she was 14 months old, and she was a mess. She was a drug baby. And we got her when she was 14 months old, and she had been, I considered it abused, but the caseworker said it was considered gross neglect. And so she had no interaction with people or nothing. And so Donna was able to work with her and everything. And she was, like I say, she was a little hyperactive. I thought she was extremely hyperactive. And Donna told me, says, no, she just a little bit. You're talking about a little bit? Oh my God. That friend of mine, Pastor Jim Wheelis, was a brother of me. We started up another little church together. He was an elder at a church, and he decided he was going to be a pastor, and he got ordained through the Foursquare Ministries, and he started his own little church. So there's a handful of us that started this little church. So we were using another church in the afternoon, like 2 o'clock in the afternoon was our service. And they had a little room in the back with a glass room where you got a speaker in there and you could hear the pastor. An adult could be with the children and they could look through the window and they could see from the back of the church, they could see the pastor and hear what's going on. Well, Chrissy would break out. She'd get out. She'd break out, and one time she broke out, and his wife Lois was taking care of her, and right in the middle of the sermon just grabbed hold of his leg and wouldn't let go and says, Pastor, Daddy Pastor. She kept calling him Daddy Pastor. When I shut the whole thing down there for a while, and it took a while to get her back in the back room again. She wanted to be up front with everybody. So we finally found a way to get her settled down enough, occupied in the pew, like there's only like 10 or 12 of us in the whole church, and she could create a ruckus. So we learned how to control her a lot better, but we just never knew what she was going to do. And then she'd get in trouble, and then we'd say, well, you're going to have to get a spanking, and so the spanking was a yardstick on a diaper. That was it, tap, tap. We didn't hit her or anything like that. So I'd say, get me the yardstick. You're going to do that again? Uh-huh. And then she would just go get the yardstick and hand it to you. I dare you. I'm going to do it anyway. I'm willing to take it. So at any rate, but she was a character. She was something else. And we'd say, you're going to have to sit in the corner in your high chair. And so we put her in a corner in a high chair. And she'd cry and cry and cry. 2 or 3 minutes later, she's not crying. She's playing with her tears, or she's smearing something around, or she's having a good old time. Oh boy, that did a lot of good. So, I was never critical of any parent or any problem that children had, having a fit, creating a noise or a ruckus. It used to really, really bother me in church. Why are these parents back here with these kids hollering, hooping and hollering? Well, they hear it all the time. So when you hear it all the time, you don't hear it anymore. Then I understood. I'd been in their shoes. Until you walked in someone else's shoes, you do not judge them.
Yeah. What did you find most difficult about raising children?
Being able to be there when they needed you and knowing when they needed you. Because when you're working all the time and you're trying to put bread on the table, you're always worried about everything else, being on time at work, not messing up at work, not having a problem, and meeting the needs at work when you have needs at home. And I know when my daughter was first coming up, she'd have different events to go to and all that stuff, and I could, sometimes I would make them, sometimes I would be late, sometimes I couldn't make them, And then as your kids get a little bit older, you get involved in other things. We were involved in the church and friends of the church, and then we would help each other on the weekends or after work and doing extra evening activities and leaving time for your children as well and balancing your life. So making sure that you're always there for them and to realize that family is the most important.
What life advice would you give to someone my age? To a 30-year-old?
I would say don't pass up any opportunities. I've passed up a lot of opportunities, and you never know where they would have taken me. When I was younger, I had a scout. One of the scout leaders was a machinist. He was a master machinist, and he wanted to take me on as an apprentice before I got out of high school, actually. And when I got out of high school, I couldn't get a job. So that offer wasn't there anymore because at that time the draft was on and the Vietnam thing was going on, and nobody would hire you until you had your service obligation over with. They didn't want to touch you. And so you couldn't even get a part-time job. So I passed that one up, and then there was another. Had a neighbor that actually came over and talked to me because I was working in a garage, doing stuff, doing body work on the car because I took body infender in high school and trade school. And he wanted me to come to work for him. And so I never took his card or anything. I just blew it off, I've got other plans or whatever. But I had people trying to hire me all the time, and I would just turn it down. I was happy with what I was doing. But at any rate, I just didn't realize that these were opportunities.
What is the most challenging part of being a grandparent?
Well, I don't know about challenging part. It's not really. I don't think there's a challenging part. It's
all rainbows and sunshine and butterflies?
Well, no, you just deal with it. If there's any problems or conflicts, you try to resolve the conflicts, and you're trying to mediate things and make sure there isn't any strife. But if there is, you try your best to try to soothe things down and make you a family again. You want to keep it as a family. You want to stay connected. But when you're little ones, they're just worried about their personal possessions or staying out of my space. Don't pull my hair. Don't go in my room. Whatever. Lock the door or whatever. And so you try to make sure that everybody understands that we're supposed to be a family, a knit group, not divided. Divided, a house will fall. So you want to keep it united.
How is today's society different from when you were a child?
It sure is a lot faster. When I was a kid, everybody walked. You saw people walking everywhere. You don't see that today. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I just looked it up a while back for your mom. Mentioned something about, I showed her on the map where I used to go to school, and the park I used to go to, Marquette Park. I used to love to go to Marquette Park. And I'd walked there before, and I didn't know how far it was. But come find out, Market Park was just like 1.3 or 1.5 miles. And school was only 0.8 miles, just under a mile. So that's really nothing for a kid to walk a mile. But there was a lot of traffic and a lot of red light stop signs and all that stuff here in the middle of the city. And railroad tracks and all that stuff, So, but kids weren't bused. You found a way, and when you went somewhere, everybody piled in the car. It's like, oh, we're gonna go somewhere, and so we had a station wagon, and so you put three people in the front and 5 or 6 in the back seat. Everybody sitting on top of each other, and you put 8, 10 kids in the car. Everybody packs in, No seat belts or nothing like that. In fact, my dad, when he bought his 1954 Chevy, that was the talk of the town because he had built-in turn signals. Turn signals on the car was, I don't believe was even I don't know if it was an option or not, but it was built into the steering column. It wasn't added on, and I have a car come with that on it. That was the first year, 1954, in a Chevrolet, and that was, quite an innovation. So as things progressed, more and more options became normal, regular things. And like I say, we walked everywhere, and we only had one car. Nobody had more than one car unless they had a couple jalopies somewhere, broken down cars sitting around somewhere, But and like I say, it was in the city, so if you want to go any distance, you took a bus, and you could take a bus anywhere you want to go in the city of Chicago. But it was a simpler time, and there was always people helping other people. Everybody knew everybody. Everybody pretty much knew everybody. You knew who they were, and usually where they lived. And if there was a problem, you could talk to them. And it's just like, you didn't want to mess up or do something you weren't supposed to be doing, or go somewhere you're not supposed to be going, because a neighbor would actually either call or walk over and say, "Hey, do you know your son is over at such and such? Is he allowed over there?" No. So they would meddle. Yeah, and so then you'd be in trouble because everybody knew what you're doing. Even though you're in the middle of a big city, people looked out. They looked out for one another. But like I say, it was a simpler life. And back then, in fact, when I was a kid, there were still horses in the street.
In
Chicago. In Chicago, horses and buggies and wagons.
Crazy.
Yeah, and that was in the 50s. And they'd come in with a horse-drawn, like a buckboard, and they'd be hollering out, strawberries, watermelons, and whatever they had, Get your watermelons, get your strawberries. And then they'd holler out all the different things that they had to sell. And they would just, in the alleyways, up and down the alleyways, they would go up and down alleyways, and then you come out, and then you could buy your produce right from the wagon,
In my head, like Chicago in the 50s, I see in my head just cars, old cars, everywhere. In my head, there's no horse and buggy, because it's odd.
There were horse and buggies. And then finally they had to outlaw them, they had to say, no more. Because, and I believe, yeah, they had to have a deal to catch the manure, the horses, they didn't tolerate that. So at any rate, there weren't a lot of them, but they'd be there every once in a while. There'd be one here and there. And also the cars, a lot of people couldn't afford. Well, the oils and the things the way they manufactured them, the cars were manufactured to not last a long time. So they wore out pretty quickly. By the time you had 70,000 miles on it, it was time for another one. They didn't last 100,000 miles because they didn't have the oils and lubrication they did today. And cars back then needed a lot of maintenance. And there was cars that smoked a lot, cars that broke down a lot.
Yeah.
And they would be literally held together with baling wire sometimes because people couldn't afford to even fix them sometimes. So then that's why you got all these pollution laws and everything, because it was really stinky and there was a lot of air pollution. And things have gotten so much better with air pollution. Because I remember when we moved to Houston in the 70s, the cities were really polluted. You could see how bad the pollution was. In fact, when we would leave Houston and go up north, as we would go out of town, head north, you look back in the rearview mirror and there would be a gray haze over the city of Houston. And then when you come into another big city, there would be another gray haze. Every big town had a gray haze over it. You don't see that today. Things are so much cleaner than they used to be.
So, now we get to go off script.
Okay.
What did you think, and where were you when the moon landing of '69 happened?
Well, I was at home watching it on TV.
How old were you?
Angie was born. I was on Park Avenue. We watched it on the
So you were in your
TV.
20s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we just thought it was the coolest thing. We just thought it was really neat. Just wished it was in color.
Yeah.
You know, it was in black and white.
Tell me about the story of Not at This Time.
Yeah, your grandma gave you everything. Oh, can I eat this? Every time we went to a store. You want this? She wants that. She wants it. Good Lord, she gets whatever she wants, she gets. And that's because your grandma just loved you to pieces. She just wanted to give you everything. And so finally, I still remember when it happened, at the Hallmark store. I didn't know what to say. And so finally I go, here we go again. Every time I take her out somewhere, she expects you to buy him something. So that's when it just popped in my head. You know, not at this time. You know, sorry, honey, not at this time. And it just shut you down. It just shuts you down. And you didn't know what to say. And then, okay, let's go. And away we went. And so it was it. So, at any rate, it took you about 10 years and you got me back. But anyway.
Yeah.
It took you but at any rate, it worked. It worked a lot. And it was the best thing I ever came up with. Not at this time. Yeah. So I said, boy, Grandma's got you so spoiled. You got to have every time you got to have something, at least a little something. And if you didn't want it, Grandma would try to find something for you. You know, she always wanted you to have anything or whatever you wanted. That's not good. So at any rate, it just popped in my head, and that's how it just happened at the Hallmark store.
What do you want your legacy to be?
That I always tried to do what was right, and that I did my best. And anyone I was around, or anyone I knew or got to know, that I always tried to be the best friend I could be to them and help them in any way. And if there was any way I could help, I was always willing to help. And that I hoped everyone, realized that I'd be there for them, no matter who they were. We all have needs at one time or other, and I'd be there for them. That's that on that.